Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube, on Rumble, or on Ganjing World. And I'm not sure if this stream is being broadcasted at the current moment on Rumble because it seems there is a technical issue between StreamYard and Rumble today, which I'm trying to solve. So if you're watching this on Rumble, please let us know in the comments below. Today we are going to have a conversation with Patrick. Patrick, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, Kevork. Great to be with you.
It's always great to be with you. You're one of the few, let's say, you have suspicions about this rift between Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu. I've seen many people celebrating as if there is a detente now between the US and Israel, and Donald Trump is going to throw Benjamin Netanyahu under the bus. However, we have a few reports this week. I'm going to show both sides of the story, and let's comment together what's going on the international scene, because Israel is a very important player in the region and also has an enormous influence in Washington itself. But this all started, I believe, by a website called The Media Line, and the Jerusalem Post. Basically, they have quoted this website saying that a Gulf diplomatic source told the Media Line that President Donald Trump will issue a declaration regarding the state of Palestine and American recognition of it, and that there will be the establishment of a Palestinian state without the presence of Hamas. The source also added, if an announcement of American recognition of the state of Palestine is made, it will be the most important declaration that will change the balance of power in the Middle East, and more countries will join the Abraham Accords. However, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, he said this is just bullocks, this is fake news, this is not going to happen. So in the past few weeks, we have heard different reports actually. Once Trump wants to, depopulate the Gaza Strip, he wants to build a Trump Tower there, he wants to build some resorts on the shores of the Gaza Strip, and then a Gulf diplomatic source is claiming that he will recognize the state of Palestine. In your opinion, do you think Trump would take such a decision, and is a two-state solution a viable option anyways?
Well, this is the big question. I, I don't know. I mean, look, you'd expect that he wouldn't make such a statement, okay, based on the people that have backed him and helped put him into office, or at least paid while he was on his way in anyway, because he could have won without Mary Madelson's money, quite
Yeah.
frankly, or any of the Israeli lobby's money. But put that aside, Mike Huckabee, he got appointed. He was requested by the lobby to have that position. He lobbied for that position. They wanted him in that position, like
Mhm.
every other cabinet position that has any foreign policy or national security related aspect to it. It was chosen by the Israeli lobby. Those were pre-approved by the transition team. That was all
Yes.
Israel, basically. That's why you have so many congressmen that have been pulled, which is unusual in America to have congressmen pulled into cabinet positions, because you're risking their
Mhm.
seat, which is
Yeah.
really stupid politically. But why would you do that? Because IPAC had already been grooming them since the beginning of their career.
Mhm.
Unlike academics and people in the think tank world, they don't have that level of control over them, unless, of course, they're in the Atlantic Council. They happen to be Atlantic Council. That's an Israeli outpost. But put that aside. So I think no. If he did, if it was a pragmatic position to acknowledge a Palestinian state, and here's why:
Mm.
because Saudi Arabia has a kind of a red line that they have drawn that doesn't get a lot of media attention, which is that there's no more normalization. There's no Abraham Accords, nothing, until there is significant steps or some kind of confirmation of a Palestinian state by Israel and all parties. So, barring that happening, there's no normalization. So Trump needs that to get that part in place.
Hmm.
It's a very important piece. So, but the thing is it real? Is it genuine? Or is it just cosmetic? Because let's be honest. Do you think if there's a U.S. announced they would recognize the possibility, or they're going to commit to a Palestinian state, as you said, Kevork, is such a state even viable? We all know it's not, but the American right, or the media that need to kind of go along with this charade, and some Europeans too, and internationalists, and maybe the Gulfies as well, they're not really going to get into the weeds on whether it's a viable state or not. The point is that to make the announcement, to move
Yes.
the ball forward. That's what's important, because we know, I can guarantee you, I would bet the entire farm and then some, that it would be a bait and switch exercise for Israel, because all they want to do is buy time. And they've been doing it for 30 plus years, building
Yeah.
settlements, annexing land. You could even say that Mary Madelson paid to have the West Bank annexed.
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
largest landowners in the occupied territories. So,
And it didn't cost them much. Basically, it cost them maybe 100 million.
yes, nothing. This is pocket money as a down payment for the West Bank. I mean, you don't have to worry about the Golan Heights. I mean, Trump recognized it as Israel, and then the kosher caliph,
Hmm.
Ahmed
Gosh, okay.
al-Sharar, he basically gave it to him for free. He didn't. I mean, that was the best deal ever. They didn't have to pay anything. I mean,
Mm.
they have to contribute. The Al Qaeda didn't contribute to Trump's campaign there. They
Yeah.
just gave it away to Israel. So, that's what I think. I think Israel's priority is, they feel they're so the radicals have taken over. They feel they're so close that all they need to do is carry on stealing land and ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
And killing people in Gaza or the West Bank is really just holding a sword of Damocles over the native population's neck, saying, if you don't leave or think about leaving or make your way to the exit, we're going to kill you. We're going to steal your house anyway. We're going to steal your land. We're going to uproot your olive trees anyway. So save yourself and your family. And that's
Yeah.
kind of like where Trump was a couple of months ago, let's be honest, with this talk about relocating the population of Gaza. So the Middle East talks that are coming up will be very interesting for two reasons. One is, where is al-Sisi and King Abdullah on this issue? Are they invited? And will Trump shake hands with Golani? Will
Yeah.
he do what Macron did and
Mm.
recognize an al-Qaeda terrorist as a head of state?
I
No,
wouldn't be surprised, to be honest, if he shakes hands with Jolani. At the moment, I'm not. I will not. I lost even my ability to be shocked or surprised from what is going on, especially after the regime change. But correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick. I think you also said that Saudi Arabia is pressing the Trump administration to at least give statehood for the Palestinians, right? Like before normalizing relations with Israel, this has to be some of the prerequisites. And the official position of Saudi Arabia has been this for quite long time. And there is the Arab Initiative for Peace with Israel. This was initiated by Saudi Arabia in 2002. But at the current moment, when I see the map of control over the Middle East and the balance of power, I don't think that this is even possible. To have a two-state solution. I don't think even if Saudi Arabia wants for the Palestinians to have a statehood, that this can be implemented at the current moment. Meanwhile, whereas the Israelis feel emboldened with their wars in Lebanon, Gaza, and in Syria, and they have a client state basically now in their borders in Syria, which had a powerful army in the past. Lebanon, now Hezbollah has been pacified or localized more or less in the country, and they're facing huge pressure from the Lebanese government, which was installed by the Americans only recently. So things don't look good for the Palestinians in this case. This is what I see, and whether the Saudis want it or not, I think this could be used as a smokescreen from the Saudis to say, oh, we cared about the Palestinians, but at the end of the day, what can we do? Look, Lebanon will normalize ties with Israel. This is what the government wants to do in Lebanon. Jolani is, what did you say? What did you call him? The Caliph, kosher Caliph? The kosher Caliph is he's so in hurry in normalizing relations. Like, it's like, calm down. You can do it in the next month. Don't rush too fast, I think there is no any military pressure or any strategic pressure on Israel to give the Palestinians what they want in this case, right?
No. And if you go by past behavior, let's predict what will likely happen. Just looking at Israel's negotiation style, basically. So they could very easily pull Trump into a trap here. And the trap would be to say Donald Trump, oh, we liked your idea about
Mm.
administering Gaza and etc. So a two-state solution with the U.S. as the chief administrator. Trump is the guarantor. We're talking about in negotiations here,
Mm.
just presenting the idea. That's a non-starter. We know that's a non-starter. But Trump would lead with that. The other one they would lead with is that we could have a independent state, including Gaza, but without Hamas.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, that's a non-starter as well. So then they would go back and say, do the Israeli spiel, which is, oh, we offered them a perfectly good deal at Oslo, and they just turned their back on it. Yasser Arafat, et cetera, et cetera. It's their own fault. They had a perfectly good offer, et
Mhm.
cetera. And they're going to they would do exactly what they did before Kevork, try to tie down some kind of bad border agreement
Yeah.
for the Palestinians. And if they reject it, then they would go to the world media and the press and say, look at these Palestinians. They just don't want peace.
Yeah.
They just don't. They don't have leadership because we've
Mm.
killed them all. But
Yes.
anyway, they don't have leadership. So, I mean, and then that would kind of give Trump off the hook, and that would sort of default back to where they were when they were putting the Abraham Accords together in his first term. But as we both know, the Abraham Accords, it's the biggest piece of garbage of any international deal you can imagine. Because imagine negotiating accords and you don't even bring one of the primary stakeholder to the table, and you just do it in absentia, which is what Jared Kushner and the Trump administration did in the first term with the Abraham Accords. So that's a non-starter, but that's the whole legacy. And in America, they believe it was a great success. A lot of more than half Americans in their deluded, worldview, because of Fox News and CNN, they believe that the Abraham Accords brought peace to the Middle East. I mean, come on. So look at
they paved the way basically for October 7th.
It did. So that's kind of like, in all of this, all what we're talking about here, Kevork, it's just buying time for Israel. Because that's what really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And until somebody steps up, a U.S. leader steps up and calls that out and say, no more of this.
Yeah.
We know you're going to build settlements. You want the Jordan Valley. You want all of these huge swaths of land in the West Bank and half of Gaza. Sorry, it's not going to happen. We're going to revert to international law. Here's the UN resolutions.
Yeah.
Until that happens, this is just all an exercise of delay. And Israel is the master at this. They perfected this over decades. And that's my biggest fear, is that this is just going to be another time-wasting exercise. Yeah. And the Arab states, the Gulf states, are just going to kind of be lured with the prospect, just luring them further and further away from principles.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there are some Gulf leaders, maybe not so much in the UAE, but definitely in Saudi Arabia, that realize the gravity of allowing this genocide to be complete, what that's going to do to their future, their legacy, their ability to rule in the future. This issue is not going to be, even if the scales of justice may not be rebalanced until 50 years from now.
Yeah,
but it's going to happen.
So.
It's going to happen, and guess who's going to bear the brunt of that? Those people who sold out the Arab population, the Palestinian, native Palestinian population. They're going to their children or grandchildren who are going to be in charge are going to suffer for that.
Yes,
and I think the Saudis maybe many things, but they're also very intelligent as well, especially on some of these matters. That's why you can see some trepidation in the voice of the foreign minister. They're very careful what their public statements are. They know it's at stake.
Especially that some Israeli soldiers have the badges here of the Greater Israel, which includes parts of Saudi Arabia. And the Zionist theorists basically saying that part of Saudi Arabia will be in the future Greater Israel project. I'm not sure how are they going to materialize that without violence and ethnic cleansing, basically, because this is the only viable way to create a Greater Israel between the Nile and the Euphrates and reaching all the way to Saudi Arabia. But that's not a viable option to perpetrate all this cycle of violence all the time. And I think this will definitely generate different types of groups that Israel says they are terrorist organizations, which they have been fighting since the 60s and the 70s. And back then they were left-wing groups before they turned into an Islamic, let's say, or Islamist armed groups, right, against Israel. So this is just a vicious cycle of endless violence if Israel is going to continue on this path. One of our new followers says, never been here live. I'm a non-Zionist Jew against the occupier state. And I want to say, there are people, many Jewish people follow this YouTube channel. Some of them are Zionist, actually, and they sent me DMs, especially after the regime change, basically saying, look, the situation has changed and the regime is gone. Now we need to form what is called a coalition of minorities against this Golani regime. And I'm like, look, I'm not fool. I'm not fool here, you know. I know that Israel supported Golani to come to power. And I know that he is a necessary tool to balkanize the country. And I'm not going to play any role, directly or indirectly, in balkanizing my country. Although nowadays, many people say we want to separate from the Golani regime. We don't want to live under the Golani regime. I'm not going to come and blame someone saying this under the gunpoint, but I'm not going to participate in balkanizing the country. And this is what they want from me, because I have a big platform. So they come to me, they try to cozy up, and they say, you have to join us. Like, we in Israel, we will help the minorities in Syria, including the Armenians. And I'm not going to do that. Just for everybody to know. So you can follow this channel. We all respect you guys here. I don't delete any comments for those who watching. Sometimes YouTube deletes or filters the comments because it includes controversial terms, so I don't come and delete them, just for you to know. Patrick, since you mentioned Fox News, that many people in the US, they think that the Abraham Accords brought some sort of peace to the Middle East, and because they watch Fox News. But yesterday on Fox News, the foreign affairs correspondent described Netanyahu as a roadblock, and he reports Donald Trump's disgust with Netanyahu for obstructing progress. It feels to me as if people in Fox News circles or in the MAGA circles are trying to present Trump as this strong character guy who is let's say facing or countering this Bibi's intervention in the affairs of the American affairs, and also persuading him or manipulating his own foreign policy, because Trump is known to be a tough person, at least in front of his public and in front of his supporters, and they don't want him to look like he is bending the knee or being too weak in front of Benjamin Netanyahu. But this is the general impression I get when I see this type of statements.
Yeah, that's really important optics. And the supposed, you say firing, but he was relocated. Mike Waltz's national security advisor was moved to the UN ambassador position, which is like following in the footsteps of John Bolton and Nikki Haley. It's a place where your career goes to die, basically, to be a UN ambassador. You're just reading Israeli lobby talking points and anti-Russian talking points. That's your job. But the optics of that was that Waltz had been co-opted by Netanyahu too much. Trump didn't like it. Then you get this leak of this story, and it's very interesting. Trump, being the WWF, World Wrestling Federation guy, certainly he would know how to fake a theatrical fight as well as anybody. But so it is interesting that the good cop, bad cop, that optics is for the Gulf, that optics is for Europe, it's for everybody, it's for the opposition. Because what happened was interesting. This is why I think there's a problem in Washington. There was a piece of legislation that was pushed out by Michael Lawler from New York, a new type of anti-Semitism bill, anti-BDS bill, was quite extreme. And last week it was going up for a vote. Marjorie Taylor Greene basically came in, tweeted out, "I'm not going to support this. I'm tired. We shouldn't be, gallivanting in the region for Israel, fighting wars for Israel." And that tweet went super viral. I haven't looked at it recently, but last time I checked, like after 24 hours, I had 10 million views. You know, who does that in Washington? Nobody but Trump. And Matt Gaetz, who got ousted from his house, is kind of scammed out of his House of Representatives seat by promising him a cabinet position, and they injected an old scandal and made him. He had already given up his House seat by then. He lost. He was supposed to be his Attorney General. Pam Bondi came in behind him. That was a scam to get him out of the House, basically,
Yeah.
because he was one of the only dissenters against the Israeli lobby in all of Congress. Just so happens that he was caught up in an Israeli-linked sex
Yes.
scandal that was completely contrived. Anyway, that bill, they basically killed it. They weren't. They decided not to vote on it. It was withdrawn. So what do you read from that? The MAGA base. The MAGA base. There's an Israel first beachhead in the MAGA base, and it's on thin ice. It's
Yes.
on thin ice, and Trump knows it. Everybody knows it, because although it's a slow burn, this issue with Gaza, and it was seen as a left-wing issue, a woke issue. They tried so hard to defend it, but it's what's interesting, Kevork, is you could look at that Joe Rogan interview with Douglas
Yes.
Murray and Dave Smith.
Oh,
People don't underestimate the political reverberations of that, because that was a pillar just basically coming out from under this weak table of this agenda with Israel, and starting to collapse, and everybody's seeing it. The libertarian right, and that's part of the MAGA base, the libertarian right. This is bad news for Trump, and he's realized at this point. And then you have add all these other details in. You've realized at this point that public opinion is tilting, even
yes.
though it's not nearly what it is on the left. But this thing being leaked out to try to, even if it's to create the impression that there's some distance between Trump and Netanyahu, it nonetheless pushed pressure on Netanyahu, on Trump, to somehow acknowledge the severity and the problem with this situation. And also, Netanyahu himself doesn't have as many allies inside Israel as he did a year ago or a year and a half ago. So there's people that political situation in Israel is still boiling, and that's also going to potentially undermine the entire project. So it's the internal machinations and internal political tribal warfare inside Israel that is also hemorrhaging the actual Israeli project. And this is kind of the way things go in history. And so there's just no way about it, because there's always going to be a power struggle at some point down the line, and they're not immune from that. There's not. They do have solidarity in terms of certain Zionist and ideological beliefs and objectives, but like, who's going to maintain power, and what's happening to this project? It's no longer completely omnipotent. The Iranians have reached out and touched them. The Yemenis shut down Ben Gurion Airport last week. I mean, and they leveled Sana'a Airport in response to the Israelis, but they pissed off the United States because they did that in the middle of a U.S. bombing operation on Yemen, and then immediately announces a, quote, truce. It's more like a surrender to Yemen after the losses the U.S. has incurred over 6 weeks. But that just shows you that it's no longer a simple equation that Israel can manage with the U.S. assistance. It's much more complicated, and they risk pulling the Gulf states into huge problems with Yemen, example, and Iran. And all of this is for Israel. All of the trouble, all of the money, all of the political capital that's been expended in and outside the U.S., it's all for Israel. And what is Israel really doing for the United States? Is that in U.S. interests? What someone explained to me, because the only argument that the far right's making is they're killing Muslims over there, so we don't get them over here. That's the base argument. I'm sorry to put it and be crude about it, but let's call a spade a spade. That is the far right argument. Oh, they're keeping radical Islam at bay. They're killing them, because we don't want them over here. We don't want those Palestinian refugees here. I've heard this from the
How about
mouth.
How about not creating a refugee crisis to begin with? This is the thing. My issue with this, let's say, so-called conservative right-wing groups is this exact point. You need to point out why there are Palestinian refugees and why there are Syrian refugees. It's not like everybody woke up in the morning and they wanted to march to Europe or to the United States, and why there has been Afghan, like why there
and Sudanese coming up through Libya. All of these are connected to NATO, military, or Israeli operations and U.S. operations. Every single migrant flow into Europe, the thing that they're raising hell about, is always connected to a specific foreign policy and military action, mainly by NATO. And that is never up for discussion. They can't put those two things together. And that to me is the adult conversation that the people like Tommy Robinson and his supporters aren't capable of having. They're not capable and neither is Nigel Farage for that matter. And neither is Trump for that matter. They don't want to have that discussion. The Democrats wouldn't have that discussion either under Biden, because they're is equally incriminated. They're equal accessories to those crimes as the neocons, as the right, the left. They're all in on that. So it's up to us, and I don't know who is able to bring that thorny subject up of the connection between the immigration issue and foreign policy and NATO and Western military actions, because you cannot separate these things. You can't. And this isn't just for the anti-imperialist bleeding heart left to make this argument. This is a common sense, pragmatic, rational argument that needs to be made. And Elon Musk certainly isn't going to raise the specter of that.
Elon Musk is paying to influencers and activists on social media, and we know them now with names and accounts, to spread exactly this, to avoid the conversation about Israel, to make it all about, again, they're playing identity politics, Muslims against Christians, and this is an Islamic invasion of our countries. Look, if you don't want demographic change in your country, and this is something that I argued since I came to Germany in 2015, like, if you guys don't want hundreds of thousands of Muslims to, I'm just saying for an argument's sake, if you don't want them to come, let's speak about the root cause of this. But as long as you guys, left, center, right, all the spectrum of this politics are pursuing the same policy, basically, which is either nosing in the internal affairs of these countries, or imposing sanctions on the economies of these countries, or basically covert operations, regime change, or direct invasions. Let's talk about that. When we address that, then we can discuss this as peers. But if you want to put all this discussion aside and only talk about the symptom, which is, oh, we have so many refugees in our countries, this is a dishonest discussion. And this is what also Elon is doing with his PR team and with his influencers, who paid influencers on X, exactly, who they had a different opinion before Elon took over X, and now all of a sudden they all want to avoid the elephant in the room. And I'm so sick and tired of that. And if this is so I don't know, why is this even controversial, Patrick, to say these things, right?
I'll tell you why it's controversial, and this is why Israel is involved in that conversation politically in Europe. They're involved in that conversation in America. That's why Israel and the lobby and those interests back Tommy Robinson. That's why they have made a concerted effort over the last 30 years to make an alliance with the far right in Europe, because they wanted to transform that wing of politics, that street level wing, to be anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, because it suits perfectly. It harmonizes Western foreign policy with Israeli policy, and so that's absolutely what this is all about, Kevork. It's very easy to see. It's very simple, and Israel has found a few soft targets in Europe that it's been able to work, political parties and governments and leaderships, to make this about, we're on your side against this immigration problem, and the Muslims and this and that and so forth, and the Geert Wilders of the world. Okay, that these people have nothing in terms of policies other than, it's just all anti-immigrant, and then meanwhile everything that their governments and NATO is doing is encouraging immigration.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's incredible.
Patrick, you mentioned what was her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene. And you also mentioned Matt Gaetz. I will show 3 videos now for us to watch together. And the first, because I didn't watch, to be honest with you, this video of Marjorie Taylor Greene. So let's watch that, and also Matt Gaetz about this particular case.
I don't think we should be fighting wars on behalf of Israel. And many Americans agree with that. I'm one of those Americans that are really sick and tired of the narrative that we're constantly told that we're supposed to hate some country that's overseas, that maybe we've never been to. We don't know anything about that country, but we're told that they're the greatest threat to our freedoms and our democracy, and that we have to go to war with them. I've never seen a Houthi or a Houthi, or however you pronounce it. I don't even know what they look like. I haven't seen them back home in Rome, Georgia, where I live. I haven't seen them in Washington, D.C. And I keep saying that, how is this a threat to everyday Americans when they are not threatening us here at home on our homeland? I don't think we should be fighting.
So this is her video, and then we have. I think this is also new, or I'm not sure. Matt Gaetz exposes the U.S. The Israel lobby. If you oppose U.S.-Israel relations, you face tremendous headwinds to get into government.
If I want to get into government, do I have to support Israel?
You know, the Israel lobby has an incredible power over the decisions that government makes, and what we've seen is, on the left or on the right, if you question the policies of the Israeli government legitimately, people will accuse you of anti-Semitism. And that is weird and wrong and kind of unlike anything else we see anywhere else. Now, there are legitimate expressions, of concern regarding the anti-Semitism that we see on college campuses. But I got to tell you, no one's asked me the question that directly. And the truth is, if you oppose the U.S.-Israel relationship, you face tremendous headwinds to get into government, not just appointed government, but elected government as well. Dude, it's moving. And
what is
the thing? It's
This is the final one, which is Matt Walsh.
I think that if you can't defend yourself as a nation, or if you can't survive without being propped up by another government, say ours, then you shouldn't exist as a country. That's just the way of the world. So
wait. If you can't exist without being propped up by another government, say ours, you shouldn't exist. Yeah. Israel cannot exist without being propped up by the United States.
You think so?
Its nuclear program came from the United States. Its weapons come from the United States. Its economy is supported by the United States. I'm not attacking Israel. I'm just saying, in point of fact, I think that's true. And I mean, Israel thinks it's true, or they wouldn't have armies of lobbyists and influencers in the United States. Bibi wouldn't have shown up twice in the past.
So I haven't seen such an open conversation about Israel, let's say 10 years ago, right? Like it's shifting in the US itself, especially on the right.
Yeah, it is. That just, first of all, that was the wildest podcast I've ever seen with this. I know that I've seen that young guy's viral videos. He's making them for a couple of years since he's been very young. He's good on camera. So props to Matt Gaetz for like going. That's a lot more edgy than like going on Joe Rogan or some of these other, or Lex Friedman, the NyQuil.
Oh man, please no.
Dramamine, I call it. But anyway, and so props to Matt Gaetz. Like Matt Gaetz does more things, says and does more things that I increasingly like than anybody really in and or out of politics. So I'm glad he's there. Let's just put it that way. But on the Matt Walsh comment, yeah, that's good. It's trending in the right direction, Kevork. It's trending in the right direction. These guys are really slow to get to the punch, as we know, but they've always been slow. That's part of mainstream. All this podcasting and media, it's all mainstream anyway. It's just a slightly better version of the old mainstream media, but not necessarily, because there was a lot more free speech and wild debates in the 70s and 80s on mainline network TV compared to in the last 20 years. But one thing Matt Waltz did, though, in that same interview with Tucker Carlson that I disagreed massively with, was when he was talking about, I think it was talking about October 7th and so forth. I think he was kind of justifying Israel's policy against the Palestinians because they're
Yeah.
a terrorist organization there and attacking the Israelis. So as a police force, Israel had to, knows what they need to do to
I mean,
defend
he works
themselves.
for Daily Wire at the end of the day. So
He's taken the context out of 80 years of context, and plus all the legal rulings and international law and UN resolutions, which I think is irresponsible for anybody that calls themselves a journalist to have that little knowledge or not willing to even mention or caveat such comments without acknowledging the scope of the story. But
Patrick, my friend, there are very big podcasters in the United States, very big ones, right? Everybody knows them. And then every week when there is some geopolitical big crisis, let's say Pakistan and India, I don't know what's the issue between Pakistan and India. I know it's about Kashmir. I don't know much about it. I just shut it and I try to educate myself. But you have podcasters basically posting big videos, the truth about the India-Pakistan war, or the truth about the Syrian war, and then you turn on this and you laugh your ass off because these people are basically copying Wikipedia articles, putting it in the fucking ChatGPT and asking them to make it a script for them, and they're just talking heads. They're making no sense. They're not making any geopolitical arguments in it. It's sometimes hilarious for me to see that these big talking heads in the US are so famous that they're shaping public opinion and they make no sense at all. And sometimes I wonder, how have these people become this famous and influential in the United States? Is it the algorithm? Is it PR? Who is behind them? How is it possible for someone to be that famous in the political environment? And when you watch it, you're like, oh my God, this is for 7-year-old kid. This content is not for grown-up people who understand what's going on.
See, the way you frame that question is perfectly innocent, Kevork. You're being completely honest and totally transparent in your question, but the way you're framing it assumes that that this is alternative independent media, and the reality is they've gotten to that position for the same reason that Anderson Cooper got to his position at CNN, which is say nothing, address nothing, take no positions of any significance, or take no risks, and just play it completely within a narrow lane of acceptable speech and commentary. And YouTube will reward you. Your advertisers will reward you. You'll get the sponsorship. You'll get the views and clicks. You'll never get strikes. Okay, you'll just be huge, and then you'll get signed to a $20 million deal with the Daily Wire after you've jumped ship from a mainstream platform. That's unfortunately, that's kind of the formula for success in the independent media. So this is it's exactly like the mainstream. They have managers, they have ad managers, they have public relations people. There's things they can and can't say, or there's things that they can say but they can't say it yet. They can't say it yet. So I still will give some credit to Tucker Carlson for at least wetting the issues, dampening these issues, even though Tucker's probably under some heavy constraints, because let's face it, nobody wants to be Kanye at the end of the day. The whole economy wiped out. But so Tucker deserves credit. And to Joe Rogan's credit, I've been a huge critic of Joe Rogan just because of the milquetoast treatment of important issues and the delay in getting to the nub of the issue, like with COVID and the vaccines and the foreign policy stuff as well. But the fact that he did that debate with Douglas Murray and Dave Smith, and the fact that he moderated that pretty well. I mean, I couldn't have done it as well as he did, because he did extremely well as a moderator. He's actually a very good moderator.
He's sharp. He stays on focus during the 3-hour conversation, basically, and listening well. Guys, you agree or disagree with him, that's completely up to you. But when I give him credit for this podcast conversation as well, it revealed a lot to the people. And I think the general public has seen the difference between someone who claims to be an expert and basically linking this to the COVID era, when they told us, like, listen to the experts, believe the experts, but then the experts turned out to be wrong, and he did exactly the same thing, that I'm in my Ivory Coast, I'm the expert, you listen to me, you're a comedian, what is this kind of arrogance, I think he's not an expert. What is your expertise? You visited few hours the Gaza Strip on a state visit by the Israeli occupation forces, and you sat on a chair, you took a photo, and then you become an expert on it. Is this equal to expertise? It's crazy. And also Tucker, I think Tucker asks a lot of questions and listens. Sometimes I feel like some of the episodes is definitely a psyop, or definitely, let's say, it's a PR for Trump. He hosts certain personalities to, deliver some hidden messages. But recently, when it comes to Israel, he's also asking the good questions and the right questions. Probably this is also part of the trend in the United States. Like, the US has spent a lot in Israel's wars, or Israel's, let's say, initiated wars, or they have persuaded the US administration to go into wars. And now the last one was in Syria. And I'm highly confident that this was a joint operation between Turkey and Israel in November last year to oust Assad from power. And now we have what was the name? Kosher Caliph in power. And this is where I wanted to move this conversation with you, because he's in a hurry to get the endorsement from Trump and also from Israel. Basically, this week, opposition sources, and those are people close to Golani, by the way, like they sit with him, they talk to him, they give him advices. They say that Golani, he offered Trump a deal. He wants to give the US companies an exclusive right for Syria's oil and gas and reconstruction projects, also telecommunication. He preferred AT&T over the Huawei. And he will share intelligence with the US and normalize relations with Israel. And also, he will join the fight against ISIS and Al-Qaeda. In return, he wants for the US to lift the sanctions. I say, at this rate, his next offer might include handing over his pants and maybe the deed to Damascus. It's just beyond me. When you're a politician and you're in a weak position, of course you want to compromise, but he's giving everything in one basket to the US. I mean, what about the future? Do you think the US will not ask you for more? If we learned anything from the US history in foreign policy, if you give them an inch, they will take a meter. They will come more and more and more. So even if you have, let's say, a package of deal to Trump, you have to separate them. You have to start negotiating by one and by time, and see the circumstances. Maybe the circumstances change in your favor, but giving him everything at once, it feels so. This is not diplomacy for me. This is not a deal. This is a surrender. I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So Golani, aka Ahmed al-Sharar, the Saudi. He's a Saudi, right? He's a Saudi. He's not Syrian.
He's born and raised in Saudi Arabia.
So al-Sharar, self-styled president. Okay, let's call it what it is. It's a terrorist overthrow. Pardon the pun. A beer hall putsch. I couldn't think of anything better to say, but a sort of a beer hall putsch.
Yeah.
So junta. Okay, so he can't be president because a president has to be elected. First thing. Okay. Second thing is, what do the neighboring states want? Okay. Does Israel want to see Syria in its whole, or would it prefer to see Syria broken up into smaller pieces? How about the United States? Does the United States care if Syria maintains its structural borders and post-Sykes-Picot integrity? No, they don't. Does Turkey care about Syrian sovereignty, their borders, or does Turkey want a piece of it? Of course, we know what the answer to that is. And what about internally? There's a very strong Kurdish faction in Syria. Do they want to have their own statelet or autonomous region or country, if you will? The answer is yes. And the list goes on. Then they're creating a situation on the coastal regions that's begging for the international community to give Christians and Alawites a coastal ethno-religious sanctuary stroke region where they will
Hmm.
be safe. So Golani, judging by all this terrorist that they installed into power in Damascus, his job was to break up Syria.
Yes.
Everything he's done has been to undermine or destroy Syrian sovereignty. First thing he did, allowed Israel to take the Golan Heights and Mount Hermon. So now they have strategic advantage militarily. So they allowed Israel to destroy all of the infrastructure, military, naval, air defense, everything gone. That's also a big pillar of sovereignty. Financially, it's been an absolute disaster. That's another now dependent, begging for loans, begging for financial aid. That's another relinquishing of
Qatar is
sovereignty.
now paying the public sector in Syria, basically. So Qatar
there you
basically
go.
bought the entire public sector in Syria.
So it's like Ukraine. It's like the Ukrainian rump state. So there's all of those things. Plus, you're bringing in a radical minority to rule over the population with an iron fist, with a religious theocracy, which is going to further polarize a lot of parts of Syria. So basically, it's finished. It's toast, and they're just play acting. He doesn't. Al-Sharar Golani doesn't even have control over the 120 odd factions that are around the country. He doesn't have control of. He probably has control of probably about 30 of them out of 120. So what's that? A fourth of the country. Not to mention borders and regions. So this guy's a joke. And so what he's going to do now is begging for them to sell off every single piece of the country you could possibly sell off, even if you lift sanctions. There's countries that aren't under sanctions and they have zero sovereignty. I can point to a number of these countries in the world. That's what he is basically doing to Syria. His job is to destroy Syria. It wasn't to liberate Syria. It was to destroy, dismantle, and break up and make it into a dysfunctional state, begging to be broken into smaller pieces, because that's what Israel wants. That's what, quite frankly, I don't know what Jordan's view on it is, but they seem to be agnostic on that. Iraq probably doesn't like that result, but there's not a lot Iraq can do because they have their own internal issues.
Actually, Golani canceled his visit to Iraq to attend the Arab League summit because there is a court decision to arrest Golani if he comes to Iraq.
Warrant. Yes. So listen, I trust Iraq better than any other actor in the region, actually, around Syria. So, and it's funny that they're not allowed to have a seat at the table to decide about the destiny of this longtime neighboring country of theirs. Iraq should have a seat at the table, should have equal, or in fact more say than any other country, because they have so much in common and share so much historically, politically, regionally, and so forth. And so, I mean, there's just so much wrong with this equation, Kevork. It's hard to know where to begin, and we're just watching it unfold in front of our eyes. It's the exact same thing that you and all of our colleagues warned about over 10 years ago is happening now.
It's all happening in front of our eyes, and they're still living in denial. I published today this article on Substack, and I said, what about Palestine? Golani seems perfectly willing to sacrifice what little remains of Syria's historical support for the Palestinians. His security forces have arrested members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine in Damascus as part of a confidence-building measures to appeal to both Washington and Tel Aviv. He even stated his openness to normalizing ties with Israel, citing respect for the 1973 disengagement agreement. But his capitulation didn't stop at rhetoric or arrests. Recently, the Golani regime facilitated the transfer of multiple bodies of Israeli soldiers killed during military invasions into Syrian territory. One of them is Tzvika Feldman, died 43 years ago while fighting against Syria. According to official statements by both the Israeli government and Mossad spokesmen, the bodies, including one believed to be that of Israeli spy Eli Cohen, executed by the Syrian state decades ago, were exhumed and handed over to Israel. Golani complied with the transfer after pressure from Turkey and Qatar, and in return, nothing. No Syrian prisoners were exchanged, no national interest served. I mean, in the past, the former Syrian government exchanged the Syrian Druze activist Sokhi al-Maqat in exchange for remains of Israeli soldiers. Golani, by contrast, simply handed them over, an unprecedented humiliation dressed up as diplomacy. And Patrick, as if that weren't surreal enough, Golani's next offering reportedly includes, brace yourself, a Trump Tower in Damascus. Yes, this former Al-Qaeda commander wants to bring Manhattan's gaudiest real estate to the heart of the Levant, hoping the glitz of gilded skyscraper will earn him a meeting with Donald Trump during his next Middle East tour. So soon we may have a Trump Tower in Damascus in exchange for a meeting and maybe kissing the hands of Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia. What is this? It's too much. Even like, how can you even justify this submission? You know, this too much. Unless he's an asset. If he's an asset, it makes sense. Other than that, I don't see it that way.
Yeah, the Reuters article covering some of this, and it's just it's such propaganda. It's just blatant propaganda. There's this wide-ranging effort in the West to legitimize Golani somehow, but this is they're doing such damage to themselves, and by rewriting history, and by changing long-standing Western liberal policy, which is that if there is a regime change or an overthrow, that the group, even if it's a warlord or a terrorist, has to announce an election date. And you have people like Reuters is quoting Charles Lister, you know, like people like this. These are, I don't know who he works for. Is he Qatar or if he's a U.S. or a British intelligence asset? Who knows? He's getting paid by somebody to do public relations for Golani, who was a wanted terrorist just a couple of months ago, and now is being, I'd like to know who's doing his suits, actually, Golani. Is it a Savaro tailor? Is it somebody from New York? Is it a tailor in Tel Aviv? Because that certainly would be interesting, wouldn't it? And to find out, and let's, we can arrange a BDS boycott for high-end men's haute couture. Whoever's dressing this guy is just unbelievable. So, I mean, it really makes a mockery of the whole war on terror, Kevork. And that means that you're just rugging everybody from Bill Clinton all the way to George Bush, Obama, Trump 1.0, Biden, and quite frankly, Trump's rugging himself. If he shakes hands with Golani, that's going to be the end. That is the photo op to end all photo ops.
Yes.
And that's really that's kind of a legacy that you just can't live down at that point. And they're all playing with this. They're playing around with this, trying to give this guy a facelift, and it's kind of working, but then again, there's something just very wrong about it. And I'm just wondering if it's going to collapse, Kevork, at some point down the road.
It's already collapsed in the eyes of the general public all around the world. Like if you go to the official X accounts of the French Élysée and the French press, when they receive Golani and read the comments, just auto-translate them. I mean, it's quite obvious where the public opinion is. And as much as they try to whitewash Golani's image, every day we receive reports, we translate them, we present them to the people, and the people know what's going on. And today we received this from, which is an anti-Assad outlet, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. And according to the SOHR, the body of a Syrian Alawite man who was kidnapped on April 15, so a few months ago, by Golani's thugs, was found on the way to Salah ad-Din citadel in a horrific state. The head had been severed from the body, the entrails had been removed, and there were clear signs of severe torture on various parts of the body. Every day we have such examples in Syria. People being decapitated, summarily executed, women are kidnapped, enslaved, minorities are ethnically cleansed from their towns and villages, and their farms are given to multinational corporations to invest there. You like, and then when we report about it, they come and say, do you miss Assad? Are you missing Assad? He's not going to come back. I'm against Assad's return, he will not come back. That chapter is over. We closed that. We stood with the Syrian army to avoid this outcome that we're seeing right now. This was the reason why many people stood on the side of the Syrian army, because they knew the alternative is Golani and his thugs. They didn't want to live under Golani rule. It's not like they liked Assad or they were thugs or mercenaries for Assad. The regime, the former regime of Syria, they didn't even have money to pay. Even if they want to pay for propagandists, right? If you want to pay propagandists, they don't have the money to pay. They were bankrupted. So now that everything we said, as you mentioned, turned out to be true, it's still called an Assadist talking point, isn't it?
And it's like we joke about this stuff because it's about Golani, because it's past the point of a farce. It's just,
yes,
it's beyond a parody at this point. But everything that you just said there, Kevork, in the last 2 minutes is dead serious. That this terrorist that doesn't even have control of the whole country is running pogroms. He's running pogroms, and then he's being rewarded by NATO member states like France with a state visit. You can't extend a state visit to a wanted terrorist that is actively running pogroms, especially if you're European, against Christians or Alawites or anybody else. Because I know how Europeans are; they lean away from Islam. Okay, I understand that. But still, politically, there's no price to pay for that. But it kind of shows you this kind of immoral vacuum that Western liberalism has drifted into, whereby nothing means anything anymore. There are no ethical or moral standards for anything. It's almost like people don't know, don't care. And even if you explain it to them, they can't work out why they should care about it. It's a very strange point in history. It's not, I don't remember even 10 years ago, Kevork, you could elicit some kind of sympathy or compassion for these types of situations that we're seeing now. But it's like people can't sort of separate milk from water on this. And it's
simple logic. It doesn't exist any longer.
It's disturbing. It is very disturbing, because you can't reward a regime for just show me where that ever happened under Bashar al-Assad. It didn't. It did not happen. They say, and again, this is all being justified by these same critics that are trolling you and threatening me and everybody else. They're saying, well, it's not as bad as under Assad. Assad was slaughtering his own people. Where was he slaughtering his own people, Bashar al-Assad? Are you talking about armed terrorist groups coming from all over the world? So fighting them or shooting
Patrick,
and killing
the
them?
Syrian army lost over 160,000 soldiers. How did they die? With peaceful slogans and banners? How did the 160,000 soldiers die? This is the question mark, which they include.
They dropped dead when they were throwing bouquets of flowers at them. When al-Nusra was throwing flowers at them, they must have dropped dead. Exactly. So there was no war going on. I mean, it's ridiculous. Why are we even having this conversation? But we're trying to approach this from a logical and fact-based position, a journalistic position. But this whole political conversation is so warped. Okay, and I'd love to drag Rami Abdul Rahman from the Syrian or Osama, whatever his real name is, but he knows full well what a sham this all was, because you can see him pivoting now. And there's other activists like Rami Jara and others that are having buyer's remorse big time right now.
Rami, by the way, Rami lives, I think, in Berlin. I should send him an invitation for a coffee and organize a podcast conversation with him.
Because he's having a bit of an epiphany right now, a little bit belated, but at least you can see there's so many people like, we didn't sign up for this. This is, but you and I, Kevork, and all of our colleagues warned about this, because how come we saw this and all the revolution campaigners didn't? Is because we weren't looking at it through an emotional political lens. We were looking at it through practical, pragmatic, and under a legal lens, international law lens. So I don't know. I really, it's just soul destroying on some levels.
Yeah, guys, This is the, I'm sure you know the 21st Century Wire. This is the website, 21stcenturywire.com. You can follow all the work of Patrick, and also reports, investigations, and also sometimes he's posting podcasts in this. And also the link of Patrick's personal account X is in the description below. It's important to support independent journalists. We connect with each other to have a conversation, to bring to you quality content, analysis. You agree or disagree, this is important for healthy discussion and conversation. We are bringing to you some provocative thoughts here because we want for the people to think for themselves. That's the goal of such conversations with Patrick, and Patrick has a track record in this discourse. When he started doing what he does, I was still a little kiddo. So kudos for him. And I would like to thank him from all the followers of Syriana Analysis for coming to the show. Thank you so much, Patrick. Really, I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Kevork. It's great to be with you.
It's always a great pleasure to have this conversation with you. And thank you so much, guys, for tuning in today on all the 3 platforms, YouTube, Rumble. It works on Rumble. I just noticed that. And also on Ganjing World, which is a Chinese company based in the US, which I'm also streaming on. So thank you so much for all who watched. If you like this content, the simple thing to do is only hit the like button, thumbs up, subscribe to this YouTube channel. We are 500 subscriptions away from 100K goal. And if you like to support the independent work I'm doing, there are different means in the description below, and I will see you tomorrow at the same time. Peace be upon you and upon your families. Salam.